In this video, I'm going to take you through my brand design process from the initial ideas to the final product. For this video, we're creating a brand for an avant-garde film studio. This is a mock company that I decided to use for this project, and really their goal is to make films that put the artists first. Films that really engage their viewers and cause them to think a little bit. Those films might be a little bit weird or enigmatic, but that's kind of the goal. They want to create films that push the boundaries of the medium and create art that other studios would just be too afraid to make. Now, starting any project like this, the very first step is to make sure that you get as much information as you possibly can, so that way you understand the direction that you're going. Usually this would entail some kind of brand facilitation or brand discovery, whatever you want to call it, just a meeting with the client to go over their business, their goals, their ideal customers, where they want to go, a little bit about the identity, just so you can get a grasp of what this project needs to be and where it needs to go. Since this isn't a real film studio, I'll be using ChatGPT to come up with a lot of the answers. I'll use ChatGPT as a bouncing board for ideas. So I'll ask questions like, what are our differentiators? Who's our ideal client? What are our values? What's our mission statement? Who are our competitors? Out of those competitors, which one do we like the most? Now, if you do this yourself, the results aren't going to be perfect. They're not always great. So they do need a little bit of tweaking, and you might have to ask some follow-up questions. But if you keep going and you keep digging in, usually you can get something that's at least usable, especially for a project like this where we're not doing it for an actual client. But if I was doing this for an actual client, I would not be using ChatGPT. I would much rather talk directly to the client to make sure that I'm understanding it from their perspective and not some AI that's kind of telling me something that might not actually be true. So through that initial discovery phase, what I'll do is I'll distill all that information down, as well as any extra research that I did, into a single document. That document will become an analysis for the brand as well as a brief, so that way we make sure that me and the client are on the same page. This will include things like the brand's purpose, the brand's mission, customer personas, as well as extras like a mood board or some key characteristics that are going to guide this project. Personally, I like to use mood boards at this part of the project just to make sure that me and the client are on the same page visually. There's a lot of times where we use descriptive words, but sometimes it means different things to different people. For example, I might say, hey, we're gonna go for a modern looking brand, but what does modern mean? For some people, that means everything is white and it's very smooth, very curvy, but for somebody else, that might mean it's black and has lots of harsh edges. So you can see both of those can kind of fit into the definition of modern. So that way, if we use a mood board, we can kind of get past that differentiation and make sure that we're all on the same page. And once the mood board and the general brief has been approved, we can move on to making stylescapes. I know there's a lot of designers who might do things differently, but I prefer to start with stylescapes before making any important assets for the client. The way that I approach it is we're looking to create a visual direction, a specific personality, a specific brand. And if I were to start with the logo, the logo might look great on its own, but how does it look like within the context of the brand? So if we start with that and then we move into the visual direction, the colors, the typography, any of the design systems, it might not actually work. So for me, I prefer to start with stylescapes rather than something like logos, so that way we can make sure that the visual direction matches the logo at the end of the project. Another reason why I really like stylescapes is it allows me to explore ideas and concepts without having to commit to them. I also use it to gauge my clients. For instance, I like to usually make 3 different stylescapes, and I make each one different from the last. The first one that I make is usually pretty straightforward, it doesn't really push any boundaries. It pretty much does exactly what the brief is asking. So for the stylescape that I made, I wanted to go for something that was bold, but still had some creative elements to it. But for the most part, I kept it pretty simple and I didn't rock the boat too much. Now for the second stylescape, I might try to push the boundaries just a little bit, give myself a little bit of leniency and try to be a little bit more creative and experimental. And so for this one, I went for a more dark and moody stylescape. I think this one is definitely gonna feel a little bit more mysterious and enigmatic, which might be exactly what the brand is going for. Now for the third option, I really try to push the boundaries, and I like to make something that I think is just outside of the client's taste. So for this stylescape, I wanted to try something that was completely opposite from what I did before. So I wanted to add more colors and be a little bit more creative and expressive. It's not quite as dark or as serious as the other ones, so it's definitely different, but I think it still just fits in with the brief. So using the 3 stylescapes, I get to gauge where my client is at. Are they more conservative? Or are they a little bit more bold? I can kind of figure out where they land, so that way further down the project, I kind of know what they like and what they don't like. And oftentimes, I feel like most brands go with the second option. It pushes the boundaries just a little bit, but it doesn't go too far as, let's say, the number 3 option. And personally, this was actually my favorite stylescape and the one that most people liked whenever I asked for their opinions. So I think this is the one that we're gonna go with. Sorry to interrupt, but I just want to quickly talk about something called Maker Division. They're not a sponsor of this video, but I am affiliated with them, so if you do sign up for their service, I get a little bit of a kickback from it. So what is Maker Division? Maker Division is a community, a curriculum, and a resource for anyone who wants to start their own creative business. Whether that's being a freelancer like me, or you have bigger aspirations and you want to create your own studio, if that's you, Maker Division is the place to be. I've been a part of Maker Division for over a year now, and I would be completely lost without it. I've learned countless things through the curriculum, the community, and the coaching calls. It doesn't feel like a chore to do or to be a part of. Honestly, it's been a highlight of my business. So if that sounds interesting to you, check out their website, and if you decide to sign up, use my affiliate links. All right, back to the video. So now that we have a more refined visual direction to go in, we can finally start work on the logo. Now for this logo, there was two directions that I wanted to explore. First one being some very bold looking logos, and the other one being a little bit more typographic. As always, my logo design process always starts with sketches. They don't have to be good, they don't have to be detailed. I just use it as a way to generate ideas, put them onto paper so I can always have them, and I can always come back to them if I need them. Really, it's just putting as many ideas as I possibly can onto paper. So that way, whenever I start getting into refining everything, I have a bunch of ideas to choose from, and there's gotta be at least one or two of those ideas that are good. Once I've got a bunch of sketches, I can move on to looking for some inspiration. So this might be Behance, Pinterest, Dribbble, just looking at a bunch of different logos and seeing what other people have done, any kind of concepts that I might be able to take from someone else's logo and apply it to my own. Of course, this is walking on a fine line because you don't want to copy what someone else has done, but oftentimes I find there's a spark of inspiration that you can find from someone else's logo that gives you a different idea or a new direction to explore that you wouldn't have thought of otherwise. After that, I'll finally move into Illustrator and start bringing those ideas to life and refining them. Just like in the sketchbook, I'm going to try to come up with as many possible variants as I can and just put them out and see what I can come up with. One of the cool things about designing a brand like this is there's not a lot of things that are off the table. The brand is supposed to be a little bit obtuse, so it would make sense if the logo was too. And that's a big part of why I chose this project in the first place. It really allows me to try things out and do things that I might normally not get to do working with some more conservative clients. I'm someone who's okay with breaking the rules and pushing the boundaries of an idea. There's not a lot of companies out there that really like that kind of style, and so I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to just let loose and be as creative as I possibly can. So I was able to try out a bunch of ideas. Some of them were really crazy and wacky, and some of them were maybe a little bit more safe. But after a lot of experimentation and trying things out, I landed on these three logos. The concept that I kept coming back to was these films are going to be obscure. They're not going to tell you exactly what the story or the themes are. And so I thought that might be an interesting concept to explore, obscuring. And so for the first logo, I went with a little bit more of a simple approach, just having the word signal on top of the word 404. And an idea that I had for this logo was to switch out the font for 404. That would give the brand a little bit of flexibility and adaptability for whatever they're putting out. So the main logo might be a sans serif, but maybe they switch it to a serif for the kind of film that would make sense for that kind of font. Now for the second one, I obscured the name by rotating some of the letters. On a first read, someone might read the logo as S-GNAL 404. And then hopefully after that, they would be able to connect the dots that it actually says signal. So the meaning is obscured at first, but once you take another second or a second look, you're able to identify what it actually means. For the third logo, I wanted to play around with the idea of signals, being a little bit more literal and using a radio tower, except I pixelated the radio tower kind of like the signal is being obscured or jammed. Again, just like the films, the stories and meanings might not exactly be easy to pick up on, so you might kind of have a weaker signal. Out of these three logos, I was really leaning towards number 2. Honestly, it was my favorite, but it felt a little bit too weird. The more I looked at it, the more I kept thinking, all the designers are going to just burn me at the stake because I'm breaking a bunch of rules and they're just going to hate it. But that's actually why I decided to use this logo for the rest of the project. I think the film studio itself would be a little bit controversial and it wouldn't be afraid to take bold ideas and statements and execute them. So the way that I thought about it was this logo is actually probably the most authentic to this brand. So I just went with my gut, and that's the one that I'm using. So now that we have a stylistic direction and a logo, we can finally work on bringing this brand to life. For every client, it's gonna look a little bit different because they're gonna need some different deliverables, but I wanted to make this project as robust as possible, so I decided to do just about everything that I could possibly think of that this brand or company might need. Poster designs, billboards, social media, merch, brand collateral. If you can think of it, I probably did it. And really, this is where the visual identity really gets to shine and start to feel real. You get to see exactly how everything that you've made to this point comes together. You get to test and see what ideas that you had are actually feasible and which ones just don't really work the way that you thought they would. So in this phase, there's always a little bit of a learning curve, because up to this point, everything that you've done has been basically a concept in your head. But now you actually have to put that concept into reality and see how it holds up. Because you might think, oh, I'll use patterns this way, and then you try it out and it just doesn't really look the way that you thought it would. Or maybe you thought you could use a specific color palette and it doesn't really work the way that you thought it would. So you start testing things out and creating rules for yourself, which will then feed into the brand guidelines. The more you work on the identity, the more you'll discover, and the more that you'll be able to put into the brand guidelines to create a robust guide for the company to use. For instance, one of the things that I explored was stretching out the I in the logo. It was something that I thought was really cool, and it turned out I was right. So I made sure to include that in the brand guidelines so that way they could continue to do that and do it appropriately. And now we can finally take a step back and see everything put together. This project was a lot of fun to work on. It was just the kind of project that I could let loose on, do whatever I wanted, and create something that I thought was really cool without having to worry about a client not necessarily being interested in the ideas that I like. I was also able to explore some ideas and concepts that I don't normally get to explore, and so I feel like, if nothing else, this project was a great learning experience, and it'll be a great portfolio piece to showcase what I'm really capable of whenever there's not something that's holding me back. But still, I'm really happy with how this project turned out. It's dark, mysterious, enigmatic. It doesn't really care about following traditional conventions. It just kind of does its own thing, and it doesn't care if you hate it or not. And while I can always appreciate designs that stick with the brief and don't push the boundaries, I'm always going to be someone who likes to do that. I want to push the boundaries. I want to see how far I can take an idea. I want to make something that's worth remembering. And to me, I feel like I managed to do both of those in this project. I got to refine my skills as a designer, but I also got to push my creative muscles and see what I'm capable of. So to me, this was a perfect project. Now, on a different note, there was one other thing that I wanted to talk about. I finally decided to open up a store for all the things that I do. I'm still in the process of putting things up on the store, but what I'm planning on doing is putting up my poster designs, merch designs, and design assets, and I'm really hoping to continue to expand that as time goes on. So I'd really appreciate it if you would just go give it a look and see if you can find something that you like. It'd be a huge help to me, and I'd really appreciate it. And if you have any ideas or suggestions for things that I should add to the store in the future, let me know and I'll see if I can make it happen. Now, if you enjoyed this video, I have a couple other videos on the topic of identity design. So if you like this video, check out this video right here and you can keep watching more. But if you're looking for something a little bit different, you can check out the rest of my channel where I have a bunch of different videos covering a bunch of different topics. And if you like what you see, I'd appreciate it if you would like and subscribe. Hopefully, I'll see you in the next video.